It's going to be essential to make sure that your documents are stored properly at all times. And depending on what type of document they are and the nature of how you use the document, there's going to be many different ways that you're going to be able to store the document. So it all depends on whether it's a physical document or if it's a document that you have on your computer, say like a PDF file or something of that nature. So depending on what type it is physically will depend on what methods that we use to store the document, of course. So if it's a physical document where we utilize things like, folders, uh, storing those folders in filing cabinets, so on and so forth. But if it's a PDF file that you'd have on your computer, then we'd go a different approach, which is, of course, do we want to look at encryption? How important are these documents? And how do you personally feel like you need to be storing them? So, determining the type of document that you have is going to determine how initially we're going to be able to store them. So, that's the first thing. And another thing is, I guess I should go into more of the paper documents. So I guess I'll go into that before anything else. So whenever you have your paper documents, you want to keep in mind, number one, the frequency of use. You don't want to take your document that you use, pretty frequently, pretty regularly. Say, maybe it's, a lot of people use their social security number a lot. If you, for some reason, you don't have it memorized, get that memorized. But, if it's something as frequent as a social security number, or, maybe you use your birth certificate a lot for a certain situation or for a certain purpose, you want to make sure that you have it somewhere that's not only secure but easily accessible. So, say you're not storing it with 20 locks behind it, and now every time you have to go and get your birth certificate out, you have to go through all of these obstacles, and it's just a whole thing. So make sure, depending on the frequency of use for these documents, that you have a way of accessing them, efficiently. But if it's something that you know that you're not going to be able to, or that you're not going to want to access frequently, then you can take other measures to make sure it's secure. If it's documents that you don't use every day or documents that you don't use frequently, even if you don't use it frequently, or even if you do use it frequently, it's still a very good idea to keep them as secure as, of course, possible. And if you do need to go through several checkpoints to make sure that you get your document and you have your document secure, then by all means, of course. But I'm saying, if you're using a document pretty frequently, you want to keep that in mind. Um, so, yeah. The first thing that it's tried and true, before, you want to keep in mind things to consider when you're storing your paper documents is the length of time that you're going to be keeping these documents. How long are these documents going to last? Are they going to last 10, 20 years, or, last centuries? There are people who find marriage certificates from the 1800s. That's an important document. How long do you want these documents to last? Do you plan on passing these documents down? Your great 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 grandmother's birth certificate, something of that nature. So how long do you want these documents to last? Do you ever want them shredded? What's your plan on that? And that's also very important, having a plan on what you want to do with these documents, say later down the line. I know we don't think about it now, but decades from now. Um, Excuse me. I always yawn whenever I do a video, so keep in mind I will yawn a lot. But you want to go ahead and have a plan, what you plan on doing after a certain amount of time passes. Do you want to discard of them? How do you want to discard of them? And how long are you going to keep them? I guess in the safe in circulation, basically. So disposing of them, knowing how long you want to keep them, and if it's something that you want to pass on, like a heirloom, of course, like your marriage certificate, your birth certificate, you want to pass that on, like, you know, like something of a heirloom, then you want to look into getting quality supplies. It goes less into storage and more into document preservation and knowing which types of paper, or knowing which type of paper is printed on what, knowing the type of paper that you have, knowing that, you know, you have to take out paper clips and stuff like that to be able to best preserve it, put it in plastic. You know, later down the line when things get super fragile, you're gonna have to be wearing gloves. So it goes from just keeping your documents to preservation. If you do plan on preserving your documents, I do highly suggest you invest in a folder that's specifically a file folder, just a folder in general that's specifically designed for document and file preservation. You can find them on Amazon, because, you know, the oils and everything, over time, you know, the oils get mixed and it's all just a big mess, and things start to fade, and you want to preserve it as much as possible. So, you know, you put it in between plastic or something else, depending on the document and how sturdy the paper is. You know, all goes into how long you want to have it and what avenue you want to go down, and I will talk about document preservation. But, oh, excuse me, again, I will yawn 100 times before this stops. So, yeah, I don't know why I do it. It's a constant yawning and yawning and yawning and yawning. But beyond that, so after that, um, knowing whether or not you want to preserve it after that. Of course, you know, the ways you want to discard them, how long you want to keep them after having that planned out. You want to look at some of the methods of keeping them. Say you don't really care about preservation too much, and you just want to have basic storage methods. I don't know if I have it with me right now. Looks like I don't have it right now, but I do keep my files. See if I can't find it. Yeah, no. So I personally keep my files in a little binder. Actually, hold on. Alright, so I keep my documents in this cute little file folder that I got from Walmart. You can see, got working with here. So this is like a very, very, very basic storage method. I'm going to be upgrading mine soon because I want to do more of document preservations. I do have some stuff that I want to pass down from generation to generation just to preserve, I guess, my family's history, my history, and my family's history. So I'm going to be looking into document preservation for a lot of these documents, and I will update you on some methods, of course. However, this is one of the more basic ways you can store your documents. On the level of how secure it is, it's not very secure at all. However, it is easily movable from one place to another. I'm constantly going to Hungary, the country of Hungary, and back to Texas. I go back and forth from, you know, Eastern Europe to the US. So having my documents that's easily movable is something that I value. So having that is something that's very, very useful for my situation. Again, it's all for your situation. And you could even do this same method, but with like a lock. So if you have a lock, that would be even better. That is the most secure you can get. And I will say I am a bit foolish for not having mine locked. However, this is more of a, I guess, and this should be for you also, more of a temporary file storage situation, because I am in and out of Hungary and the United States. I'm constantly going back and forth doing document work and stuff like that. So this is very, very useful for me, easily taking out my birth certificate and stuff like that. But that is a very basic way of storing your documents. I don't recommend it. It's not very secure, but if you need the convenience, then it is perfect and it gets the job done. If you need something that's more secure, get anything with a lock, anything with a code. That'll work too. You can even use a briefcase. Now keep in mind, this is for if you are not concerned really about preservation. If you did want to do some preservation with the code, and I don't even recommend that very strongly, because a briefcase can be broken into. It can be, take a chainsaw to a briefcase. It's going to open. But if you want something a little bit more secure, you can get a briefcase with a code and store your documents all in there. You can get a very good quality safe. The older ones are going to be your best bet. The newer ones, just don't do it. The older ones are a lot more sturdier, a lot more fireproof, they're made out of real metals. But of course, they can be very expensive. So a more inexpensive method would be to get some of the newer ones. Some of the ones that you could do your fingerprint, you can do the little code, and you have a key if all else fails. And make sure you have a fail-safe just in case it malfunctions or something happens and you're not, out of luck. I would say get one with like a key, a keypad, also a keypad, a digital keypad, a physical key, and you could do one with a fingerprint scanner, but it doesn't have to. A digital keypad and a key is just fine. And I say technology isn't 100%. Technology is not 100%. So in case something happens, something malfunctions, and next thing you know, you're struggling to get into your safe, you can always take the key, put it in, and get your files out, with the least amount of struggle imaginable. So, yeah, make sure it has multiple ways of opening in case something happens. And this doesn't apply with some of the older, if you are lucky enough to get your hands on the older safes, this does not apply. So that's another method if you decide to go with the safe. Again, make sure it is well worth the money in case make sure it's like fireproof, waterproof, floodproof. God forbid, you're in one of those situations and, your documents get flooded or burned up. You don't want that. So you want to make sure your documents are well protected. I know there are these other ones that are like these fireproof, it's like a fireproof safe. It's like a fireproof safe. Sorry about that. Duty always calls. But anyways, you can get these little, I guess, they look like envelopes that are fireproof, and that's also a good way to store your documents, because I know most of them have come with a lock on them. So they're pretty secure. So those are the ways of storing some of your paper documents. Now, if you want to get into more of the electronic documents, make sure, before I go into that, I forgot to mention, make sure whenever you're doing documents and organizations, you make sure that the documents are labeled clearly and coherently. You want to be able to figure out what that document was for, what it was used for, and what it's going to be used for in the future. Don't write anything down just to write anything down, and make sure if you were to take it to somebody else that they could be able to look at it and be like, okay, yeah, I know exactly what that's for. You don't want to leave anything up to chance or, guesswork. You never want to do guesswork when it comes to important documents, so make sure that they're labeled properly. And if they're not labeled, if you can't label them on the document itself, which I don't even recommend in general, You can put, I wouldn't recommend if you're doing, of course, if you're doing file preservations, don't use a sticky note, of course, because, you don't want it, how do you say, burning onto the paper, um, so to speak, like creating an imprint onto the paper. So I would recommend putting it on the actual folder itself. Unless you want to preserve that as well, you can go ahead and do that, but I don't see any harm in putting it on the actual folder itself. You're just using it as a folder, so it shouldn't be an issue anyways. But make sure that everything's labeled and organized correctly, especially when you're putting it into your filing cabinet. Determine what method that you want to use for organization and and organize them as such. So alphabetical, order of importance, doesn't matter. Whatever you think is best, organize them in that way. So when it comes to electronic documents, this gets a little bit tricky, because although it's not as dire as, there's a hacker waiting behind every bush waiting to steal your information, which is both true and false at the same time, I don't believe that you should be on your guard. How do I say this? I don't believe that you should have every single one of your every single, just any document, any and all documents under encryption, lock key, unless you are doing heavy duty work where there's a lot going on, and these are confidential documents. And unless that's the case, you don't need to like encrypt every single document. Just having them in a file is just fine. Again, this is very different if they're very important documents. Yes, you want to have very, very, very important documents encrypted. You want to make sure that they're stored safely. Create backups. Go on the cloud. There are plenty of programs out there that'll store your files and create backups, and that is the best way to do it. I know there's a lot of anxiety about letting, a random company, hopefully for you it's not random, this company and you trust them, letting a company have access to your files, and that's a very legitimate concern. It's making sure that you find somebody trustworthy enough to handle your documents, make sure that they don't have a history of, getting their stuff hacked into, leaked, and all that bad stuff. So make sure that you choose a very trustworthy service to back up your files, back up and store your files. Because 9 times out of 10, if you choose a really strong service, they're going to lock that thing down like Fort Knox. And you can get access to them per needed. But on your computer, you can take methods and download some software to encrypt your files and to store them that way and all of that. So, and whenever you do that, make sure that you have more than one way of accessing them, just in case you forget God forbid you forget the password and all of your important electronic documents are on that program. Make sure you have another way of accessing them, or maybe you print it out or do whatever needs to be done to make sure that you're able to access those files in the future efficiently. And last but not least, make sure that you're storing your paper documents and even, your electronic documents in a safe place. Make sure that it's not going to, if they're very confidential documents, make sure that nobody can just walk by and take a look at them, write your stuff down, and all that stuff. Your documents aren't going to be secure if somebody can just walk up and take a look at it, take a picture, any of that. Make sure it's not free flowing on your computer. Make sure that everything that doesn't need to be seen by the general public is, hidden. Simple as that. So Paper documents as well. Make sure they're not laying out in the open. Make sure that nobody can do like mine and just open it and take stuff out. Again, this is with me 24/7, and even that's not an excuse, but like I said, I travel a lot and I'm constantly taking documents out, so this is very useful for me. But make sure that nobody it's not a possibility for somebody to access it and steal all of your information. Keep all of your stuff with you. I don't want to say on you, because you're not going to be able to, carry all these documents with you on, in your backpack, of course. But make sure you know exactly where your documents are at all times. And make sure that you have a safe and secure way of storing them, and make sure they're in a location where, they can't be easily, stolen and forged. So, yeah, that's it.